Penny Langston was sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup when the glass doors of Westbridge Memorial flew open, and a man in a tailored charcoal suit stormed through, cradling his hand like it was made of glass. "Hi, welcome to Westbridge," she said, setting the cup down and straightening her posture behind the front desk. "Can I help you?" The man didn't answer right away. He was staring at his palm, blood dripping between his fingers onto the sleek marble floor. But even in his barely contained pain, Penny noticed something odd. He didn't look panicked, just annoyed. "Cut it on a broken glass," he finally muttered. "Need stitches, probably." "Okay," Penny said calmly, already pressing the call button for the on-call nurse. "Have a seat and someone will—" "I'd rather not sit," he cut in, dropping his hand and finally looking at her. His eyes were a sharp, stormy blue, and when they locked onto hers, it felt like being pinned in place. "Can we skip the waiting room part?" Penny blinked. "It's an ER, not a hotel." Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance, amusement, she couldn't tell. "Fine." He turned and sat, not in the waiting room chairs but on the arm of the plush lobby couch like he owned the place. Which, judging by the watch gleaming on his wrist and the shoes that probably cost more than her car, he very well might. When the nurse came, Penny stayed behind the desk, but she couldn't stop watching him. He barely flinched as they examined the wound. He kept looking at her. 2 hours later, he was back. "You're still here?" he asked, stepping up to the desk again. His hand was bandaged neatly. "Yeah, 12-hour shift," she said. "You're back because—" He held up a white bag. "Pharmacy didn't give me everything." "Needed to ask. You could have called." "I don't like phones," he said, then leaned in just slightly. "Besides, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For treating me like a person, not a walking dollar sign." That made her pause. "Should I know who you are?" He smiled, soft, gentle, and completely disarming. "No, that's what I like about you." He left without another word. The next day, Penny didn't expect to see him again. But there he was at 4 in the afternoon, no injury this time, just a coffee in one hand and a ridiculous bouquet of red tulips in the other. "I figured tulips were safer than roses," he said. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, blinking at the flowers. "Dead serious." He set them on the counter. "And before you ask, no, I'm not stalking you. I just had a board meeting at the hospital's West Wing, saw you through the glass and thought, you'd give a stranger flowers. You're not a stranger. You're Penny." "And I'm Weston Nash." The name hit her like a jolt. Weston Nash, tech billionaire, CEO of Nash Innovations, worth over $40 billion, featured on the cover of Forbes, the man who just handed her a bouquet like it was no big deal. She stared at him. "You're Weston Nash," he tilted his head, amused. "Still don't want to talk to me." She was quiet for a second. "Then you really bought these just to thank me?" "I bought them because I wanted to see you smile, and because I'm hoping you'll say yes to dinner." Penny blinked. "You're asking me out." "I'm not great at subtle," Weston said, setting the coffee down beside the flowers, "but I'm really great at reservations." "I work late," she said, even though her heart was racing. "I can wait. I don't date patients. I'm not bleeding anymore. You're a billionaire." "Yeah," he said with a shrug, "but tonight I'd just like to be the guy who brings you dinner." And that's how it started. Later that night, when her shift ended at 10, he was still there leaning against a sleek black town car, holding a paper bag from Westbridge's fanciest Italian place. "You actually waited," she muttered, stepping outside into the cool night air. Weston smiled. "Told you I could wait." She got in the car. They ate in the backseat with plastic forks and linen napkins, the city lights glowing outside the tinted windows. He asked about her life, her job, her family. He didn't talk about his company once. "I like how you don't fake anything," he said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Most people do." "I don't have time for fake," she said softly, looking at him, "and I don't play games." "Good," Weston said. "Because I'm already in too deep to make this casual." "Already?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He didn't hesitate. "Yeah. I don't know what it is, Penny Langston, but I haven't stopped thinking about you since I walked through those doors." Her heart thudded so loud she was sure he could hear it. But she didn't say anything, not yet, because she wasn't sure what scared her more, that he was telling the truth, or that she already believed him. Penny stood in front of her mirror the next evening, brushing lint off the only dress in her closet that wasn't wrinkled or borderline clinical. The fabric clung a little too tightly to her hips and the neckline dipped lower than she remembered. But she didn't have time to overthink it. Her phone buzzed. Not a message. A call. "Yeah," she said, pressing it between her shoulder and ear while pulling her sneakers on. "You're off tonight," Weston's voice came through smooth and direct. "So I'm sending a car," she hesitated. "You don't even know where I live." "I asked the hospital. They didn't give me your address, obviously, but I figured out where you park." "You left a coffee receipt on your dashboard. You went through my car." I leaned close enough to read it. "I didn't break in. I'm persistent, not criminal." "That's mildly comforting, Penny," she paused. "I want to spend time with you. All you have to do is say yes." She didn't say yes. But she didn't hang up either. 25 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver introduced himself by name and opened the door without waiting for her to move. The interior smelled like clean leather and jasmine, and there was a single white orchid on the seat beside her. No note. Just the flower. The car took her beyond the city's edge, the skyline shrinking in the rear view as they climbed a winding hill she didn't know existed. By the time they arrived, the sun was low, casting a golden glow across the modern glass house perched above the trees. She stepped out slowly. Weston was waiting at the top of the steps, wearing a dark button-down and no tie. His sleeves were rolled, and his hair had the kind of tousled perfection that only came from someone who never had to try too hard. "You brought me to your house," she said before she reached him. "No," he said. "I brought you to mine. Isn't that the same thing?" "It will be, eventually." She stared at him. "You're assuming a lot." "I'm hoping," he said, stepping aside to lead her in. The interior was even more striking than the exterior glass walls that opened to a sweeping view of the city, soft lighting, and a long table set for two with silver-rimmed plates and crystal glasses already filled with water. "You didn't do this," she said slowly. "No," Weston replied. "I hired someone to, but I picked the music." He gestured toward a corner where a live cellist sat, playing something soft and cinematic. "You hired a cellist." "I didn't want to talk over a speaker." She crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous." "I know," Weston said, walking toward her. "But it's honest. I don't date. I don't have time. But I keep thinking about how you looked when you told me you don't fake things, and I realized I don't want to fake anything either." She looked around the space again. "You think this is real?" "No," he said. "This is effort. The real part starts when you tell me why you looked like you were about to bolt the second you saw my name." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the edge of the room, where the glass wall opened to a narrow balcony. The view was endless. "I've seen people like you," she said finally. "Not just at work, in life. People who think they can buy moments, people's silence. I've watched them walk past women like me every single day." "I'm not walking past you," Weston said. "No," she admitted. "You're walking straight at me with a full orchestra and a catered spread. So what would you rather I do? Something that doesn't feel like I'm being auditioned." He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "I didn't plan this to impress you. I did it because I know what I want. I want to understand you, and I don't want to waste time pretending that's not what this is." She turned to face him. "You don't even know me. I know that you work double shifts and still manage to look people in the eye when they're at their worst. I know you didn't ask for anything when I showed up bleeding, and you didn't flinch when you found out who I was. And I know that when you think no one's watching, your shoulders drop like you've been carrying cement blocks all day." Her breath hitched. "I see you, Penny. And I'm not going anywhere." The silence stretched for a full breath before she whispered, "I don't need saving." "I didn't come here to save you," he murmured. "I came here hoping you'd let me try to be worth your time." Dinner passed in a blur of slow, burning glances and questions that peeled back layers she hadn't touched in years. He asked about childhood memories, not traumas. Favorite authors, not past relationships. And when she asked about his company, he redirected. "I spend all day being Weston Nash," he said. "Tonight, I just want to be the man sitting across from you." By the time dessert came a plate of something rich and complicated she couldn't pronounce, he leaned forward. "Let me take you somewhere tomorrow. I have a shift early. Then after, just an hour." She hesitated. "Penny," he said softly, "I'm not trying to fit you into my life. I want to build something that includes yours." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. The next evening, Penny stepped out of the hospital through the staff exit, her messenger bag slung over one shoulder and the back of her neck damp with sweat from 12 hours under flickering fluorescent lights. She hadn't given Weston a definitive answer about tonight, but she wasn't surprised when a deep navy sedan rolled up to the curb, the same driver from before stepping out to open the door. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Then she slid inside. This time there was no flower waiting, just a folded note on cream paper tucked into the seat pocket in front of her. "Trust me." She exhaled through her nose and leaned back against the headrest. The car moved smoothly, gliding through traffic like it was cutting its own path, and when they pulled up to the curb 20 minutes later, she blinked in disbelief. They were in front of a quiet, ivy-wrapped building with no signs, nestled between a bookstore and a florist shop. Gas lanterns flickered on either side of the door, and the windows were misted from the inside. The driver opened her door and nodded toward the entrance. "He's waiting for you upstairs." She climbed the narrow stairwell 2 floors, pausing when she reached the top. The door was already open. Inside, Weston stood barefoot in a room that looked like a library crossed with a greenhouse. Tall windows framed the city skyline, and overhead glass panels revealed the darkening sky. Vines clung to the walls, and the scent of something earthy and clean filled the air. He turned when he heard her. "I wanted to show you my favorite place." She stepped inside, her shoes quiet against the old wooden floor. "What is this?" "It used to be a print shop," he said, walking over to a small table tucked beneath a skylight. "I bought the building because I loved this room. It's the only place I can think straight. You live here." "No, I keep it because it reminds me of before when I still thought success meant something simple." She sat across from him, resting her arms on the table's edge. "You think it doesn't now? I think it's easy to chase the wrong things when people keep handing you keys to every door." She looked around. "This doesn't feel like a door. It feels like a secret." "That's what I needed it to be." He poured 2 cups of something steaming from a ceramic pot, rich, spiced, and unfamiliar. She took a sip. It was warm and surprising. "I used to come here to breathe," Weston said, watching her reaction. "Lately, I come here to remember who I was before I stopped listening to myself." She set her cup down. "Why did you stop?" "Because I thought I had to become someone else to build everything I wanted. But now I'm not sure I like the version I ended up with. You seem like someone who always gets what he wants." "I used to," he said. "Not anymore." Penny looked at him, the quiet between them stretching just long enough to feel like a decision. "What changed?" "You," she blinked. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable," Weston added quickly, "but I've never met someone who could look straight at me and not see the headlines. You're not impressed by the things that impress everyone else." "I don't have the luxury of being impressed." "I know," he said. "That's why I want to show you something real." He stood and walked to the far wall, pulling aside a curtain she hadn't noticed. Behind it was a large canvas half-finished with sweeping brush strokes in deep blue and gold. "You paint?" she asked, rising from her seat. "I used to. I stopped the day I took my company public." She stepped closer. "Why?" "Because I started measuring time by quarterly earnings instead of breath." She turned to face him. "And now I want to remember how it feels to make something without a price tag." She studied the painting. "It's beautiful, not perfect, but raw. That's the only kind of beautiful I trust anymore." When she looked back at him, something shifted between them, some fragile thread neither of them pulled too hard but neither loosened. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly. "But it doesn't feel small. It's not. I don't do casual. I wouldn't want you to. I'm not impressed by cellists and city views. I didn't bring you here to impress you." She stepped back, her hands at her sides. "What are you doing, Weston?" "Letting you see me," he said simply. "All of me." And for the first time since they met, she believed he wasn't trying to prove anything. He walked her to the door without touching her. No kiss, no pressure, only a glance that lingered like a promise. As she descended the stairs and stepped back into the night, Penny realized she wasn't afraid of the way he was looking at her. She was afraid of how much she wanted to keep looking back. The moonlight was silvering the pavement outside Westbridge Memorial when Weston stepped onto the sidewalk, holding a large white pastry box in one hand and scanning the lobby through the glass. Penny was behind the front desk, flipping through a clipboard and biting the inside of her cheek in concentration. He waited until she glanced up. The look in her eyes when she saw him wasn't surprise, it was wariness softened by something she hadn't let herself name yet. "I know you're working," he said the moment he stepped inside, "but I brought something that might qualify as an emergency." She narrowed her eyes, already reaching for the intercom. "If you're smuggling cake into my hospital, I'm required to confiscate it immediately." "Then I surrender," he said, holding it out. "From a bakery that closes at noon and doesn't list a phone number anywhere, I had to bribe 3 people to get this." She opened the box. Inside was a single lemon tart topped with sugared violets and gold-dusted berries. "I'm not eating something that looks like it belongs in a museum," she muttered, but already her fingers were pulling one of the tiny forks from the side pocket. Weston leaned against the desk, watching her take a bite. She chewed slowly, then looked up. "Okay, fine, that's unfairly good. I needed to see you tonight." Her fork paused mid-air. "I didn't say yes to anything." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not asking anything tonight. I just wanted to be near you." She set the fork down and folded her arms. "You really don't give up, do you? Not when something feels right." She hesitated, then leaned forward. "There's a reason I've been cautious. I've seen what happens when people like you get tired of trying." He straightened. "What happened?" "My mother worked 3 jobs for most of my childhood. She dated a man once who came from money. He bought us groceries, paid our rent for 2 months, fixed the car. Then one day he disappeared without warning. She broke more than her heart trying to hold everything together after that." Weston's jaw tightened. "So you think I'll do the same?" "I think people with options don't always understand the weight they leave behind when they walk away." He nodded slowly. "You think I haven't left wreckage before?" She didn't answer. "Well," he said, voice low, "you're not wrong. I've made more mistakes than I can count, but none of them felt like this." "You keep saying that." "I keep meaning it." They were quiet for a long moment. Then Penny said, "You know I'm not going to be someone you can fold into your life like a part that fits." "I don't want you to fit," he said. "I want you to change the shape of everything." Her hand curled slightly on the desk. "I've been rethinking things," he added, "about what I've built. Who it serves, whether it's even worth what it cost. And what's the answer? I don't know yet," Weston said, "but you're the first person who's made me want to ask the question." Her pager buzzed on the counter and she glanced at it. "Emergency in pediatrics." "I've got to help with intake," he nodded. "Go, I'll be here when you're done." She hesitated. "You don't have to wait." "I know," he said, "but I want to." She turned and walked quickly down the hall, and he stayed where he was, the tart box closed, his hands in his pockets. 40 minutes later, she came back, her ponytail slightly messier and a crease between her brows. "You're still here," she said, sounding more tired than surprised. "I told you I would be." She stepped around the desk and leaned against the counter beside him. "You know this probably isn't sustainable." "What isn't?" "You showing up with tarts and declarations." "I'm not trying to sustain a pattern," Weston said. "I'm trying to earn a future." She gave him a long look. "And what does that future look like to you, you and me?" "A new blueprint for everything I thought I wanted. No press releases, no facades. No pretending," she exhaled. "I don't want a penthouse or a private island. I know. I don't want flowers delivered to my desk or candlelit dinners with cellists. I remember. I want someone who won't flinch when things get hard. I won't." "You say that now." Weston stepped closer, his voice quieter. "Okay. Then give me a chance to prove it." Penny looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "You want a chance?" "I do." She reached into the pastry box and pulled out the last bite of tart, holding it up to his mouth. "Then start by finishing what you brought." He laughed, leaned in, and took the bite. The next morning, Weston stood at the podium in front of a room filled with investors, board members, and a dozen journalists. He wore the same suit he always did for these things, but something in his posture had changed. "I'm here to announce a structural overhaul," he began. "Nash Innovations has operated with one goal, growth, but I've realized that growth without purpose is just expansion. Starting today, we're shifting focus to projects that serve people, not just profit." The crowd stirred. "In the coming months, We'll be launching a new division focused on healthcare infrastructure, partnering directly with hospitals to provide technology that actually works for the people using it, not the ones who sign the checks. A reporter raised a hand. What prompted the change, Mr. Nash? He looked out at the room, then smiled quietly. Someone reminded me that success without substance is just noise. That night, Penny's shift ended early. When she stepped outside, a modest white car, not a limo, waited at the curb. Weston opened the passenger door himself, holding something small in his hand. "I didn't bring flowers," he said. "I noticed. I brought this." He handed her a key on a simple chain. She looked at him, puzzled. "It's not to a mansion, it's to the studio." "I want you to have a place that's yours too." She stared at him. "I'm not asking you to move in. I'm asking you to stay in my life, however that looks." She closed her fingers around the key. "You're serious," he nodded. "I want to be someone you can count on. Not just someone who shows up when it's easy." Penny stepped forward and kissed him, no hesitation, no questions left to ask. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Then let's build something real." And this time they walked toward the car together. The first time Penny unlocked the door to the studio on her own, she didn't step inside right away. She stood in the doorway, fingers curled around the key Weston had given her days earlier, and let the quiet hum of the city outside fade into a hush. The room was exactly as he'd left it, the half-finished painting still on its easel, the ivy-covered walls glowing with the soft gold of early evening sun. She walked in slowly, her footsteps echoing against the worn floorboards. There was a small envelope on the table. Her name was written in bold black ink. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. "If this is your first day here alone, then it's already working. Yours, not mine, no pressure, no schedule, just a place for you to breathe. You can paint or read. Or destroy the painting if it makes you feel better. I'll be down the block if you need me." She folded the note and set it neatly beside the ceramic mug he always used when he worked in the studio, the one with the chipped handle. She didn't paint. But she sat there for over an hour, just letting herself be still. The next week brought a rhythm neither of them had expected. Penny's shifts were still long, her patience still countless, but her exhaustion began to feel different, less like drowning, more like swimming toward something. Weston didn't show up with elaborate surprises or grand speeches. Instead, he met her between moments. A quiet breakfast in the back of a bakery before sunrise, a quick walk through the park with his hand brushing hers, or a voicemail left on a breakroom phone that simply said, "Today was better because I knew you were in it." One Thursday evening, she came home to find her apartment door propped open with a paint-splattered shoe. Weston was inside, barefoot, holding a small stack of framed photos. "You're redecorating now?" she asked, stepping inside. "I realized this place has nothing of me in it," he said, setting the photos on her coffee table. "And nothing of you that isn't tied to work or obligation. So I thought we could start something new." She glanced at the pictures. They weren't of them. They were black and white prints of places, a narrow alley in Florence, a foggy bridge in Prague, a beach with no footprints in the sand. "These are all places you've been?" she asked. "They're places I've never had time to go, yet." She looked up at him. "And you want to go now?" He nodded. "With you, one at a time, no headlines, no press, just us." Penny touched one of the frames gently. "I don't have that kind of time." "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But I want you to know, I'm building a life that leaves space for you in it, not just a schedule." Later that night, curled against his side on her worn couch, she asked, "Do you ever miss the way things used to be? The constant movement, the speed?" He looked down at her. "I miss what I thought it was supposed to mean, not what it actually was. And now, I'd rather spend an hour watching you fall asleep than a decade building something no one remembers." He didn't say anything else, and she didn't need him to. Weeks passed. Penny began spending more time at the studio, sometimes with Weston, sometimes without. She didn't paint, but she started sketching quick lines, messy shapes, impressions of faces in brief moments. He never asked to see them, but he always left her sharpened pencils and fresh paper. One Saturday, Weston brought her to a hilltop just outside the city, where a small vineyard overlooked rows of wild rosemary and olive trees. The air smelled like sun-warmed stone and crushed herbs. They sat on a blanket, eating bread and cheese that he'd packed himself, and she leaned back on her elbows. "I didn't think this was your speed," she said, watching bees drift lazily over the grass. "Neither did I," he admitted. "Turns out you changed my pace." She turned to look at him. "Do you ever worry it'll go back to how it was?" "I used to," he said. "But not anymore, because this," he reached out and laced his fingers with hers, "isn't something I want to leave behind. It's the only thing I want to move forward with." She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "I love you, Weston," he stilled, not from surprise but from the weight of it. "I've loved you since the moment you looked me in the eye and didn't ask for anything," he said, "and I'll love you every single day that you let me." She didn't cry. She didn't need to. It was enough to feel her heart settle into his words, like it had been waiting for them all along. 3 months later, they stood in front of a judge in the same studio where they first shared silence. She wore a simple ivory dress and held a bouquet of wildflowers Weston had picked himself that morning. He wore a button-down and no tie, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. There were no guests, no photographers, no press, just them. "I promise to never ask you to be anyone but exactly who you are," he said, his voice low. "And I promise to never let you forget who you are when the world tries to make you someone else," she replied. They kissed with the windows open and the sound of the city drifting in like music. Afterward, they walked hand in hand to the bakery where she'd once stolen 10 minutes between shifts, and Weston bought 2 lemon tarts. "For tradition," he said, handing her one. She took a bite. "Still unfairly good." That night, they didn't go to a hotel or board a jet. They went home to the apartment, now filled with framed dreams and a mess of open sketchbooks. They lay tangled in each other, the window cracked to let in the breeze, and talked about building a garden on the studio roof. Not someday, soon. She fell asleep with his hand resting on her hip, and he stayed awake long enough to memorize the rhythm of her breathing because this, at last, was the life he'd been trying to build all along. No more facades, no more noise, just love. Quiet, constant, unmistakably real.